Hey y'all, and welcome to Geospatial Experiences. I'm your host, Melissa Mayo, and I'm an Esri engineer on the product team. This podcast focuses on the application of geographic information. Let's go on a journey together with some of my amazing coworkers, along with Esri customers, partners, and distributors who are doing really cool work in the field of GIS. I'm really excited about this episode of Geospatial Experiences. I have a longtime friend of mine on the podcast today. James Thomas is joining us. He's with Volkert Inc., which is an engineering firm here in Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome, James.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. We've talked about it for a little bit, and
Yes.
I'm glad we're making it happen.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
And so, James, you are the Alabama Traffic Engineering and Transportation Planning Manager at Volkert, correct?
Correct.
All right, we're going to get into that in a little bit. So that sounds like that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of experience, and we're excited to hear about it.
Getting there,
yeah. So the first thing we start everybody out with on the podcast is their journey, their geospatial journey. So tell us how you were exposed to GIS as an engineer. Walk us through your background and your journey.
So the first time I got exposed to GIS was actually in college. It was a wastewater design class, and we reached out to the local county that Birmingham sits in, which is Jefferson County, and they had actually started mapping out a lot of their utility lines. And as a part of that project, we borrowed some of their shape files, brought those in, and then even actually helped the county go in and expand the current utility lines that they had. That was part of our deliverable, as that class and a part of our grade, and it was kind of nice to be able to work with some of the engineers at the county at the time and be able to utilize, really going from paper, which is what they had for the most part then, to actually getting them into, their first set of digital data. From there, after I got my first job, recession hit, and there was, a big downturn. People were looking for things to do, and I got lucky that our Carolina group that was based out of Raleigh had a GIS group. Actually had probably some old school GISPs that were there, and I got the opportunity to learn from them from a big FEMA contract that company had that I was with at the time, and it was good. I got to learn a lot. It was a new stretch opportunity for me that was kind of outside of just the pure engineering standpoint. And from there, kind of started asking questions, getting into it, and then kind of started asking more questions of like, well, hey, can this do that, or can GIS provide these types of capabilities, and started seeing that, hey, this might be something that we could actually utilize in the engineering space. And so I kind of brought it back to Birmingham with me, and then talked with some of the supervisors that we had in Atlanta at the time, and was like, hey, I think this might be something really cool that we could get, these group, that we already have employed with us down, and kind of see how we could do it. And then we started using it in mapping. We started using it really in asset management, kind of in my realm of the world with traffic engineering. We started mapping out traffic signals, those locations, pole locations, and then as everything grew, started adding more data into it, being able to geotag photos, being able to geotag and actually upload any documents that we had, as part of those assets, and be able to turn that over to our clients, and them actually be able to go out into the field. Now everything's advanced, and we're doing these things on our phones. Our guys are out in the field with laptops, these days. We've even been utilizing Survey 123 a lot. That I know is a package of y'all's, and we use it for surveys. We've used it for client surveys. We've used it for data collection. One of the things we used it for recently was a guardrail inventory project, and we were able to capture that data and actually bring it into the client's enterprise system, and it's actually seamlessly now integrated into ArcPro, from ArcMap. So it's been a good journey. I mean, it has really done a lot, for my career. Like I said, with the recession, it helped me stay employed, which was, a good thing back then.
Absolutely.
So it's been, a good thing. And it actually got me into coding, was the first thing that got me into, heavy coding, that then led into some other projects for us. And, I still use Python today.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's awesome. That's a great geospatial journey, James.
Yes.
You don't oftentimes think about an engineer having that kind of exposure to it. And I knew you had really good exposure early on, and you had really practical applications for it too. That I feel like that builds up that helped build your skill set up in ways that maybe some others probably didn't have when you were going into some of these projects. That gave you kind of a leg up on some of it, and allowed the company to have an advantage for being able to pursue some projects that it might not have otherwise been able to pursue. I may be making assumptions with that, but that's sort of where I've always kind of felt like you were kind of uniquely positioned with that with those skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, it's really helped us in the long run. Myself and the companies I've worked for, just the engineering community as a whole, and being able to take even small data sets all the way up to a statewide data set, doing things like linear referencing systems, being able to capture roadway data, number of lanes, pavement conditions, I mean, you name it, being able to capture that amount of data and it be accurate and robust, to then be able to use it for federal requirements, state requirements, anything that we have to, submit in. And I've noticed, over the years, those that have the capability within the engineering community to utilize GIS has typically had a leg up, on some of the competition.
That's awesome. I love that. I'd like to explore the field of engineering for a little bit and chat with you. So talk about what it's like to be an engineer. That may be a loaded question, James.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot of big projects and work a lot of long hours to make sure that everything's taken care of.
Yeah, and there's really two sides to that coin, especially in the civil engineering space, and I guess I should mention that, for those of us in the transportation engineering space, we are civil engineers by degree. And with that, there's kind of two sides to that coin. One's the public side and one's the private side. So for me, I chose the private side. I've been a consultant for my entire career now, and my clients are the public side. So that's me working with cities, municipalities, counties, the state, all the way up to FHWA, which is the federal set, or USDOT. And for that, it's good in that it's for me, it's always been about puzzles, and solving problems, and that's what I enjoy about being an engineer and being able to utilize these types of technologies, to leverage that to help us solve our clients' projects, and problems that they have, as they're going through.
That's great. So and you kind of hit on it a little bit, but how does transportation engineering differ from some of the other types of engineering? Because I know you mentioned that you're civil by degree and then you focused in on transportation, but how does that differ from, other types? I know when, I was at the power company, there were a lot of electrical engineers, and, we encountered some mechanical engineers, computer engineers. It's, lots of different areas for that.
So really for us in the civil space, we are the engineers that deal with the natural environment. Pretty much anything, as sometimes we say, that keeps a civil society is done by civil engineers. That's your wastewater, that's anything on the utility side, transportation, bridges. So we kind of get, broken out into several subsets, that falls under that umbrella of civil engineering. And for us on transportation, pretty much if it moves, we're accountable for it. And that's always kind of been one of, an interest of mine, and what I see, with those that work with us and are also in the profession, is just being able to, have a dynamic set, of not only data but problems, to where, things aren't always one and the same with what we're doing. But, for us, I would say probably too, we are more of a mix of in the office and in the field. I think that's probably one of the larger differences between us and some of the other sets, not that, others are just 100% in the office, but, we have a lot of field work, that we do as a part of transportation engineering.
It's a combination of those skill sets from being in the office and working on projects, either behind the computer or with people, having those conversations, but also going out in the field and interacting with, probably people out there, and then doing, surveys and measuring and all of that type of field collection work, I guess. Correct. Is a good way of putting it. So it's really interesting. So I was just about to ask you what interested you in engineering, because you've been on the path and on the direction as long as I've known you. You were going to be an engineer, James, and so you did it. You've been an engineer, and so I was thinking back the other day when I was writing questions about it. I wonder what was it that pulled James into it. I couldn't remember if your dad was an engineer.
He is.
Okay.
He worked for a local company here in Birmingham for over 30 years. He was a second generation, there. So I kind of fell into it a little bit, through proxy, with my dad. He was always really good about, our house was always full of, running tests and experiments. Dad was always challenging me. And, we were always in the basement tinkering with something, growing up. Dad was always working on one of the cars or, trying to solve a problem. And, the house that we grew up in had, a runoff in the back, and it had some drainage issues. And that's probably where I would say I got my introduction into civil engineering, is actually going in and, helping Dad solve that drainage problem, building retaining wall, so kind of on the water side, the structural side as well. And just always having a love for motorcycles and cars, and being in. I remember growing up sitting in the back of the station wagon, with my brother, the old school rear-facing seats, and looking out, seeing traffic and big trucks, and just always had that fascination. And I just remember my mom always saying, every single time she was turning around, I was asking, why this or why that. And I just found that it seemed like any time that I asked that question, why, in order to get to the answer, it was some type of engineering book or something, going to the library trying to research. And so I think I just kind of naturally, fell into the curriculum and the profession, and, have enjoyed it ever since.
You've always been curious, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, yes. Always asking questions.
We had someone on the podcast in season 1. His name was Hussein Nasser. He works for Esri, and his advice to everybody was to stay curious. So,
yes.
It seems like that's pretty good advice from him, and it's something that helped you fulfill your dreams of being an engineer too. So,
yeah, my granddaddy used to always tell me, always try and go to bed having learned something new that day, and I try and carry that with me, every day forward, try and get that into those that I'm mentoring, the younger engineers, is hey, never stop asking questions, because that's how you learn.
I love that. I think that's great advice. Yes. The grandparents have good things to tell us if we listen to them, don't they?
They do. They do.
Okay, so you've been in the engineering space for a number of years now. I couldn't remember how many when I was writing the questions.
Coming up on 20 now.
I was thinking it was coming up on 20. So, it's been a hot minute, hasn't it? So how have you seen the engineering landscape change and evolve since you've, been in the space and you've been working in it?
Honestly, I'd probably say with the acceptance of technology. We're kind of one of those that I feel like we're always maybe, not hesitant, but, we are very cautious in accepting new technologies. We always have that, trust but verify kind of mentality. That's just our, kind of, personalities, I guess. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've, seen change is now, where, everything used to be, field collection, everything used to be, I guess, on those hard calculations, we're starting to see and being able to leverage those technologies. And instead of, I guess in the transportation space, one of the things that we've seen is a lot less of what we call capacity projects. So for a roadway, if it was getting congested and starting to have traffic issues, back when I first started, it was, hey, let's add a lane. And now what we're seeing is that's not the first question that gets asked. Is, oh, well, let's just build another lane. Oh, well, let's just add, capacity to this roadway. It's everybody starting to ask that question of, hey, can we utilize the space that we currently have better? Can it be more efficient? And what we're seeing is the technology is allowing us to leverage, certain aspects of that, of being able to map where vehicles are, being able to map out origin destinations, for vehicles and trips, where are people starting, where are they going from, and actually being able to, trace those trips from that start to that end point, and take signals, take, roadways, variable message signs, anything of that, to be able to give people a better choice, whether, it's either vehicle or non-vehicular, traffic these days, with that technology. And that's that's probably the biggest change that I've seen, at least within our industry, within traffic and transportation, is just using technology to kind of start asking different questions, instead of just, it being, well, that's the way that we've always done it. Now we're looking at it going, hey, there's nothing wrong with how we've done it, but is there a way for us to do it better now? And that's where we're starting to see things like GIS be able to give us, those different answers and be able to utilize the space that we already have, to its, fuller capabilities. And a lot of times it ends up saving, money, and anything that we do on the public side is all taxpayers. So, anytime we're, being better stewards of the public's money, it's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. Do you feel like it's from a cost-saving place, or is it from just the availability of what the technology can now provide enables these questions to be able to be asked and answered where they couldn't be so easily and readily available before? Or is it kind of a combination?
I think it's a combination of both. I think the technology is providing us, answers and opening up doors, that we just couldn't see or didn't know, that were there before. If we did, the technology has provided the key for us to unlock those doors. But at the same time, the cost savings, I think, has been maybe a happy accident, of that, to where, and what's good about that is if we can save the money, then it allows us to spread those dollars, further and be able to now actually do more projects, with the same amount of dollars. Because as we've, seen, things are getting tight, especially, at, funding mechanisms, but, there's money out there, and that's one of the things that, technology has allowed us to do. And GIS and a lot of things with how we map things, how we look at it, is actually being able to go in and qualify, for different grants, for different, spots of money, or, different pies, to where we can take that and actually, be able to utilize it, to a, better extent. And I will say the one thing that we've seen here recently is over the last 5 years, I've probably done, and, we've been able to fund as many projects in the last 5 years as what we did in the previous 15. And, I think that's, a good thing for us, because we're being able to serve, more people, across all communities, whether it's urban, suburban, or even rural.
I was going to say that sounds like that's been a big part of your job throughout your career, is kind of been looking at that, where's the money available, and how can we be a good steward of it? How can we gain access to some of these things and be able to work in new and different spaces, and your creativity, I feel like, has led you to be able to, facilitate that and help, with those grants and write proposals and be able to say, hey guys, we can do this, and we can go after this potential pot of money and be able to work in this space in a way that you couldn't have, maybe the company couldn't have before.
Yeah, the industry's definitely gotten a lot smarter, with the money, over the years. And I think that goes back to, it being a combination, of both, of just lessons learned, things that are being passed down, and then also being able, to leverage, everything that we have at our fingertips now. So.
Esri has a tagline's the right word for it. We have a kind of a slogan that says "See what others can't," and this feels like a prime example of "See what others can't" right here. Just just you talking through it and everything else that kept running through my head was, this is a see what others can't kind of problem right here. Oh goodness. So I was about to ask you, what kind of technologies have you utilized as you've moved through your career? I know we've talked about GIS. Are there other things that you've utilized that might be important to talk about, or that you might want to cover?
Yeah, so, on kind of since I cover two sides, I've got the traffic engineering and then transportation planning side that are both a part of my practice. On the transportation planning side, now having access to more robust data, especially at the socioeconomic level, being able to track things through the U.S. Census, having that data be more reliable, we're able to find, map out different subsets. Also being able to geocode and geospace crash analysis data from crash reports. That's been helpful, for us to be able to identify things such as hotspots. Is there an intersection that's overrepresented, within a corridor set, or is there a roadway segment, that might have more crashes than everything around it. And, being able to map those, types of areas out, has really helped. On, the traffic engineering side, probably the biggest, space where we have seen technology is LiDAR. There's actual, trucks, vans, things that are equipped with it, and now we can go out and essentially 3D map, the world, be able to map out, pavement conditions, signage, curb and gutter, leveraging that, then also just with traffic signals. Going through, it used to be inductance loops is how all that stuff worked. Then we kind of started using video cameras, then kind of morphed into radar. Now we've got hybrid sets where you're using video and radar. Now some of the new things that's coming in, there's some local groups that are testing LiDAR even for vehicle and pedestrian detection at intersections. So it's really almost been kind of a race, to what can, be done, how can it be utilized and leveraged. And, one of the things here in Alabama that we're blessed with is a lot of really good universities that do a lot of good research at the state level as well as the federal level, and being able to, utilize, those technologies there, and then being able to, test it out in the field and see if it works or if it doesn't work, has really helped. So it's, these days, if you're not keeping up with it, you're going to be left behind. So
I feel like you went into some detail about technology that I wasn't expecting.
Yes.
And, I mean, there's some really cool stuff going on in this space. You're talking about LiDAR and advances in AI. That's leading toward better predictive analytics and things that you can utilize that way. I don't know. It's just a really cool space, for you to be in right now. And I know that you're migrating and have migrated to Pro, and I know you're still moving some people to Pro. It feels like the Living Atlas is something that, is got to be beneficial for you guys for pulling in data sets and information. And this feels like it's going to lend toward, the smarter cities and infrastructure type conversations and applications down the line.
Yeah. So we've got, there's a program now here within Alabama that the DOT has utilized that's called RTOP is the acronym, but it's Regional Transportation Operations Program. And, what we're getting into with that is implementing adaptive signal timings. And that's where a lot of, that comes in. Those algorithms are constantly running, testing, different scenarios live, and then updating those and posting it out into the controllers that are constantly communicating back and forth with a traffic or transportation management center. And, being able to have that leveraged, at your fingertips and have it running, it really has saved time. I mean, we've seen travel time saved, here locally in Birmingham area with as much as 30%.
Wow, that's amazing. And you were mentioning the pedestrian crosswalk warnings and things like that. I know we've had around UAB, especially downtown, with all the students and all the, just everybody that's down there. I know we've had some people who have gotten hit from time to time as they're walking and crossing the street. Would those types of, would the technologies you're talking about help try to prevent some of that from happening and kind of do warnings? Or
that's what we're hoping. Because
I'm sure it's a common problem across, any sort of downtown area, university area, anything like that.
Yeah, anytime we start getting into the urban cores, especially anytime we get into, university campuses that are shared within, a city scape, we start having those issues. There's some kind of more rudimentary things, like leading pedestrian intervals that have, helped, with that, to where the pedestrian gets into the street first, before the signals change to green, and then the vehicles are moving. But what we're seeing is, as good as technology is, we are getting into more distracted driving. We are getting into more distracted bike riding and even pedestrian. So we're starting to see it now morph into every single mode choice instead of it just being the vehicles. And what we're kind of hoping is, right now for those PEDs, unless, it's in some type of what we call a recall mode, so it comes up automatically, people are still having to press, the buttons. And what we're starting to see with that technology being leveraged is, if we can map that out, then it can be a passive detection and pick them up whether they realize they're being picked up or not, and then they can get that service, within the signal. And, we're starting to see in some of the beta testing, in different areas, that it's helping, but, we still got a lot of research and development, to do, on that side. But, again, as new things come on board, we are trying to utilize it to the best of our ability.
Okay, James, we've talked a lot about the work that you do kind of in bigger cities and in more urban areas. What about in the rural populations and in the rural areas of, we have a lot of space here in Alabama that's, more rural. And so I'm sure there are programs and projects going on in the transportation space and in the infrastructure space in those communities as well. So what can you tell us about that?
So that is actually a big part of our industry now. One of the things that we've really been leading into is, kind of promoting rural revitalization, because what we're seeing is, a lot of the jobs and things that are out there, as industries here in Alabama are growing, such as the auto industry, some of the tech industries, what we're finding is they need space. And when you get into some of the urban cores, we have the infrastructure here, but we don't have the space. But then once you get into the rural areas, you have the space, but sometimes you don't have the infrastructure. So there's actually a lot of opportunities out there, and some of those, counties or municipalities are reaching out to either us or, other firms, to help them, be competitive for some of the grants and those dollars to go in and do some planning studies for them to help them identify areas that would be ripe, for any type of land use updates, any type of, overlay districts that could be redrawn, anything that, they could qualify for at the grant level to, kind of help them with that economic development or identify areas where, their infrastructure could be upgraded and be eligible for different grants, and then once we finish that, then that's where we kind of transition into the engineering side and can help them, go in and actually design and upgrade that infrastructure, that they need to be competitive in those markets, and, be able to go through for, being competitive, in markets, to bring that industry back into those areas that have, been typically underserved, over the past few decades. And we've really seen some, small communities, really thrive, with that additional help, additional dollars, and infrastructure upgrades to be competitive. Yeah, because like I said, we've had some really cool low cost, things that we've been able to do show like some really big bang for the buck, in some of the smaller communities, and things to where they don't have a whole lot of, dollars to spend, but we've been able to go in and just through some low cost, restriping, signing, that type of thing really shows some accidents and, seeing some upticks, in positive data metrics.
So James, what have you been really enjoying working on lately? What kind of projects, what kind of things?
So one of the things that I was tasked with when I was hired at Volkert was to help expand our service line into some other areas. And what I've really enjoyed is going in and really working with some of the smaller cities and municipalities. We've been able to do some really interesting things on the safety side, of projects. And what, I enjoy with it is a lot of times on that end, we can use data, that we've been able to collect, or even just talk with the locals, and sit down and have conversations, hey, what problems are you running into? What are you seeing on a, daily basis? What is your community, struggling with? And in those conversations, being able to identify what we call, low cost countermeasures. And sometimes that's just, restriping. Sometimes that's providing new signage, updated signage, additional lighting in different areas. And, really then being able to implement those low cost countermeasures and go back and collect data and be able to show real world results in, increasing of safety, things such as, side swipes, or angled crashes, have been reduced over the last 6 months, and it not really costing, a whole lot of money, but just being able to go into those communities and really be able to see something, kind of put your hands on it as tangible and see it in a local community, kind of, really and truly, in our backyard here at home, and being able to see, that we actually are being able to, impact people's daily, lives. One of the things that I've always taken pride in is, anything that we do, especially on that safety side, I look at it as, that's somebody's mom, that's somebody's sister, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's dad, brother, son. And if there's something that I can do, in my daily job to make sure that that individual gets home, to their family or, and they're safe, then, that's what makes me happy. That's what keeps me coming back, and being able, to do, what we do every day, work those long hours and, but be able to go in and, talk with those mayors, and have that mayor, shake my hand and say, hey, our community's saying thank you, and it wasn't, a big multi-billion-dollar project. It was something that we went in and in, 2 weeks collected all the data. In a week, we went in and made the implementations. And then over the next, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, we collect the data and we see something tangible, and that's made a difference within that community. That's the kind of stuff that, keeps us fired up, coming back to work every day.
I love that, James. That sounds that's an amazing outlook on it and a really good perspective to have on the work that you're doing. And I feel like those projects are just really, you're getting a really high ROI, a really high return on investment from these safety projects, the use cases. So,
and see, that's one of the things that I'd love, like on the backside of this, either whether it's sitting down with y'all, or your team or whomever, is essentially, getting permission from my folks to start showing y'all some of the things that we do across almost all of our projects, because but at the end of the day, we have to make a profit, and how we do that is based off of efficiencies. So one of the things that I've been wondering is a lot of the things that we do are somewhat repetitive, in how we do it, and it's across all projects, and so I don't know if there's something that, we could sit down with someone and say, hey, this is what we do, like over and over and over and over again. Is there a toolbox module that you can make that if we dump a data set, into it, because a lot of what we're doing is census data.
James, you've been an evangelist throughout your career for the incorporation of and use of GIS in your field. You've really, been a proponent of it. Like we talked, you've been plugged into it. And you've talked about how you're utilizing it for different project work and different things. So how does GIS benefit you in your role? What are the benefits? What's the payoff? What's the return for you of utilizing the technology in the space and in your role now?
So the one thing that they do not teach us in engineering school, that is probably one of the things that was the hardest for me to learn, as well as to teach to my young engineers, is we have to sell our work. Mm-hmm. And to do that, we essentially become storytellers. Mm-hmm. So honestly, what GIS helps me do the most is tell the story that the data has. It helps us bring that data to life to then share it either with our clients, or a big part of what I do, especially on the transportation planning side, is public engagement. Mm-hmm. So anytime that we're doing that, if we can tell a story with the data, that's really where GIS has probably been the most helpful, is to help us get something that is super complex, something, that's convoluted, and be able, to show it in a manner that, we can talk, to the public about and get the same premise across to them without having to go into, the need of having, that complex mathematics, or engineering degree. And then the same thing with our clients. Again, at the, government level, a lot of times what they're having to do is go out and sell it to the public themselves, city council or a county commission, so being able to have that map set, or, being able to point, at something and say, hey, here's what the data is saying, and you can see it, for the most part, in some type of pictorial, dictation, it really makes that a lot easier, for everyone to understand. Being able to take something super complicated and be able to tell it in a manner, that's impactful.
So it helps you visualize and paint the picture for people. When you have those complex and detailed and kind of difficult data sets, it helps you streamline that story and paint that picture for them. Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a really good description of what GIS does. So I'm glad to hear that that's how it helps you out. Are you seeing it utilized more in the engineering space than when you first entered the field?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
110%.
Across the board, not just at your company,
Yeah,
just across
the board.
Okay.
It used to be a little niche thing when I started. There were very few of us that knew about it. We were kind of the not black sheeps of the community, but black sheeps in that we were the only ones that knew about it and no one understood it. Now like we had talked earlier and we've talked in the past,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know an engineering company that doesn't have a GIS group now.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you will be hard pressed to find from stem to stern a full suite service engineering firm that does not have GIS capabilities. And now probably what I've seen even more is on the client side of things that they're requesting it.
Okay.
So it used to be us saying, hey, look what we can do with this,
we can do this thing,
and everything else. And they're coming in and saying, hey, we have this, and we've heard, whether it's at a conference or, through, a friend, or even just through the industry, hey, that this can be done, please utilize GIS, to help us. Most of our clients have an enterprise, license now, where pretty much their entire data sets, are housed. So yeah, to go from, you might have a handful of people within the community know what it is. Now, I mean, you can talk to anybody and everybody knows what it is.
Mm-hmm. Do you see more room for growth as far as GIS is concerned in the engineering space?
I think so. I would say at this point, I think probably what would be the most helpful is I think everyone has a good foundation understanding of what GIS can do, but I think now one of the things that I'm seeing is getting into some of those more advanced features.
Mm-hmm. More of like analytics and detailed.
Yeah,
analytics.
Like being able to see like what all that GIS
Mm-hmm.
could do. I think that's one of the bridges that could be built and could kind of help get us on the engineering side caught up with where the geospatial industry is, because I feel like for a long time, because it was new, we were coming and people were sharing with us, but now it's as those GIS groups have gotten there, they're off doing really cool things, but I think there's been maybe a little loss of collaboration, or even understanding on our side with the engineering of understanding what new capabilities that GIS has that we could leverage in our daily projects and being able to deliver that to our clients.
I think we need to bring you to UC. I think you need a trip out to San Diego, because that's where all the big stuff happens. You can get the breadth and width of all the things that are going on with the new things in the GIS world. And so I think that would be super beneficial to help with that, catching you up and catching others up as well. And there's lots of training, there's lots of tutorials, there's a plethora. There's an assortment.
Yes.
You just have to have the time to dig through it, don't you?
Yep.
Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
We're going to talk about Volkert.
Okay.
Can you tell us about Volkert? Tell us about the company, the types of projects you've worked on. We kind of covered that a little bit, or a good bit already in our conversation. And we've talked some about what you do there, but if there's anything you want to expand on with that, feel free.
So Volkert is an engineering firm. We do have some other service lines such as program management, but Volkert is celebrating their 100th anniversary.
That's
they
awesome.
were founded in 1925, so that's something that we've been super proud of. The other thing with Volkert is we are employee owned. That is something that I sought out when I was coming to Volkert. I started with an employee owned company and had been trying to find my way back to one for quite a while. It's been a fantastic company. They're headquartered here in Mobile. That's another thing that drew me to them is, we're a local company. We're roughly about 1,400, employees. Okay. Now we span the Southeast, starting to get out west now. We opened up a office out in Utah, recently. So we're actively growing. But, we probably are more so on the civil engineering side, than anything. But again, as we're growing, we're expanding, that footprint even into other service lines to be able to provide, solutions, to our clients. But it's been a good company to work for, and kind of having that employee owned, since everyone's kind of got a entrepreneurial, spirit, while we're there, so we all kind of understand that, we work for each other, not just, a company. And, that's actually been nice to get back to.
That's awesome. So obviously Volkert's an engineering company. You said civil engineering in particular. So civil engineering beyond just transportation, you've got projects in other areas as well that the company tackles.
Yes. So here locally, with Alabama, we have a civil site group. So they're dealing, with developments. The state of Alabama has several mega sites, industrial developments coming. So that group kind of deals with that. We've got a aviation group, now. So they're dealing with airports. We've done work with several airports here in the state. We also are in utilities. So that's, covering from water, wastewater, anything on that utility side. We've got a couple of electrical engineers that help us, on street lighting, as well as ITS, which is intelligent transportation systems. Then we have, our side, which is transportation, that goes into roadway design, traffic engineering, transportation planning, which is my service line. Then we've got CNI, which is construction engineering and inspection. So one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on is being what we call kind of a full suite service, firm. We can take, your project, from concept at the planning level to designing it to then having our CNI group go out, and inspect the construction. So we can essentially, kind of help you from A to Z, in the spaces that we're in.
So is that, I'm trying to decide how I want to ask this question. Is the aspect of Volkert that you focus from beginning to end, that you can help people from start to finish, is that one reason that you feel like Volkert's been really kind of successful in the space? Is that something that's kind of drawn people to Volkert?
I think it is. And, it's one of the things that drew me to Volkert, not only being able to see projects from, when my service line begins at the planning level to then, being able to stay involved and know the individuals that have it at every aspect, of, the project, through that life cycle. But then being able to see that project or drive that project, and be like, hey, that's really cool. We did that. That's been super rewarding, for us, myself and, the company as a whole. We pride ourselves in, being able to, deliver, those infrastructure, projects to our clients, and, really being able to point at something, and say, hey, we were a part of that. That's always the rewarding part.
I think that would be really cool to be able to, for you to be able to start from the inception and be able to move through and kind of see how you can help somebody at all phases and all aspects, and then, go full circle with them and then see how it's really benefiting them in the end versus, hey, I can help them with this piece and then hope that that goes through and maybe hope that they can utilize it and but you get to stick with it here at Volkert. So I think that's awesome. What is it about Volkert that makes them different from other engineering firms? I know you mentioned that, it's employee owned, and that's definitely a positive aspect. But what about the core fundamentals or values or approach, anything about Volkert that kind of makes them a little bit different in the engineering space?
I think it's the employee owned as well as the age. It's rare, for an engineering company, to be able to celebrate that 100th year, regardless, whether it's employee owned or not, but that is something that we, like to tout, is that we have been employee owned from day one, and, and still are. I think, one of the things that I've really liked, this has been one of the, a really good group, to work with. I think, we're really big on making sure that those that we, hire, share, that culture, work ethic, some of the hardest working individuals, I've had the pleasure to work with. And I think we push each other. I know we'll probably say that about most of the places, but one of the things that I have found over the years is, everybody kind of has their fit, and Volkert's kind of been a good fit, for me, and I think we're very successful in being able to bring other individuals, like us in, and we just end up being able, to help each other and kind of be able to take each other and challenge each other, too. I've noticed a lot of respect, with each other, a lot of experience at Volkert. I think that's one of the things that going to that is Volkert has a lot of long tenured folks, and in today's market we don't see that much anymore. And it is not uncommon for there to be someone 10, 15, 20, 25. We've got one of our guys, we just celebrated his 40th year at Volkert, and so having that expertise and that longevity, I think, is one of the things that makes us different in the market.
We had some of that at the power company, and we have some of it at Esri too. We have some people that have quite a few years with the company, but it's not something you see a lot, and it's probably especially in that engineering space where there's opportunities to shift and move around and get experience with other companies. So it's impressive when you have that type of tenured experience from at a company, and the projects and things that they've worked on. I'm sure that is really special for Volkert to have that. Okay, I need to shift gears with you again.
Okay.
We're going to go into the mentoring space and leadership space,
yes.
supervisor space, all those things. So you've been obviously you're a manager now, so you have direct reports, but you've been a mentor and a leader in your roles here at Volkert as well as at previous companies. I've known that you've been working with people and helping advise them throughout your career, really. So what qualities do you think are important to have in a leader in the engineering field and just in general?
Being able to admit that you don't know.
Oh, I love that. That's a good one.
That is one of the things that I try and teach my young engineers all the time, is there is absolutely nothing wrong with either telling a coworker, a peer colleague, or even a client, hey, that is a fantastic question. I do not have the answer for you right now, but I am going to go find it for you or find the individual that does. And, that taking on to that, too, just being able to realize that, everybody brings something to the table. Being able to find strengths and weaknesses, within your group and promote those strengths, try and minimize the weaknesses. But at the same time, if someone in your team, a weakness is someone else's strength, pair them together, let them kind of, work with each other, bring each other up. One of the things that, I think is really good is being able to identify, things that can help folks. A lot of times people just get put in situations where, I don't think there's any ill intent with it, but it's almost like, it's a setup to failure, kind of thing. And if you can navigate, that as a mentor, with folks, and just sit down with them and be like, hey, it's okay. Yes, we messed that up, but we're going to fix it. We have the opportunity, to take a look at it and learn from it. Just being able to, kind of take a step back, from time to time, and delegate. I know that's probably been, honestly, one of my, hardest, things to do is to delegate tasks.
I see you having a hard time with that, knowing you as well as I do.
Yes. But at the same time, I've learned over the years, like seeing that light bulb go off in a young engineer and them have that aha, and I've got it. And, to see, them have, that self-pride that, hey, I figured this out and I've got it, I can run with it. And then, they build that confidence, and then being able to take that confidence from the office to then, take them to a client, or take them to a conference and let them, speak on it, and have them grow. That's an aspect of my job that I honestly did not think I would enjoy as much as I have, is mentoring, and teaching. But being able to pass along that knowledge, to the younger generations, having done this, for coming up on 20 years now, being able to pass on that and not be the only one that knows how to do it, be able to share. And, one of the things that I'm learning is, some of these young folks are extremely brilliant, and they've taught me probably as much as I hope that I've been able to teach them.
I could see you being good at the mentoring space. I mean, you have a lot of information and a lot of experience to share with somebody, and to I can't think of my word, but to be able to impart upon them. I guess is a good way of putting it. And so, as long as you have the patience to walk them through it and make sure that they are understanding and everything, I mean, I could see you being a really good mentor with someone like that. So, I think it's well suited for you. Are there specific challenges you have to face when mentoring a group of young engineers, and how do you clear those hurdles?
Probably the biggest thing for me is realizing that not everyone learns the same way. And then being able to find out how each of those individuals learn, and when it is a 180 from how you learn, being able to get that across, in a meaningful way for them, to allow them to grow, and to be able to understand it, while at the same time not getting frustrated yourself. That's probably one of the, at least the biggest hurdles, for me. And sometimes what I have found is, just ask questions yourself. Like, hey, if you see them, kind of getting lost in the explanation, just take a step back and ask, hey, where did I lose you? What is it? Do you need to see this more visually? One of the things that we've started doing a lot is, taking engineers out into the field, and being like, hey, this is that problem, that we're seeing, look at it and, kind of show it to them. But to me, that's probably the biggest hurdle, is just being able to figure out, realizing that not everyone learns the same, and being able to figure out, what, their piece of that puzzle is, and helping them find it, and be able to see the whole picture.
I tend to agree. I found the need to figure out kind of how people, ingest information, how they learn, and the different ways in which they learn. When I was a supervisor, that was really important, because you can approach them differently, and you can put them in situations, again, that are better prepared for their learning style, and see successes in them versus, you may have somebody that you can throw them in the deep end and let them figure it out, and that's great. But then you may have somebody else that needs that walkthrough and needs that attention, and needs you to kind of give them the framework and the guardrails that they're working in. And they don't do so well when you throw them in the deep end.
Yes.
And, and it's nothing against them. It's how they learn. And so when you figure that out, then I feel like that helps across the board on both sides of the interaction, and then helps them be more successful, and you be a more successful mentor, leader, manager, whatever your role is. So I think that's really good advice. Okay, we've talked about before how what you do involves a lot of long hours. I know you work a lot of long days, making sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. You are very meticulous. When you submit something, it is as close to perfect as it can possibly be. You're going to make sure that everything's taken care of, that you want your customers to receive the best product that you possibly can provide for them, and, make sure that everything within your purview is taken care of. That's just your work ethic. That's just how, that's how you are. So how important is it, because you were talking about delegating, so how important is it to balance delegating the duties to your team versus doing tasks yourself, and identifying which of those you can hand off and versus which ones you need to hang on to personally? I feel like that was a long way to ask that question, but did that kind of make sense? Are you tracking with me?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I think it kind of goes back to finding the strengths and weaknesses for folks. I think that's one of the advantages of having a team, is being able to see where one person can take and run with this aspect of a project, or where this individual can take and run with that aspect of a project. And one of the things that I have found, over the years that has helped, is being able to go in and show examples, of projects, examples of those deliverables to, the client, and going ahead and setting that expectation and that standard within our group of, I am I'm not saying that it has to be exactly like this, but this is the expectation that I have for our group moving forward. And this is what clients have come to expect, from, either my work personally, or from a group that I have managed, and being able to, carry that forward, as, new people come in, and then, having taught, some groups and having that kind of mid, experienced group that then can continue to pass that on. And in some ways, being able to find, efficiencies. I tell people all the time, I'll get you started at A, and then I'll, help and guide you, to Z. But I have my path that I have found over the years. But if you have a path that gets you to the same end, then I don't want to handcuff you, to just my, way of thinking. So
I think that's a really good outlook to have on it. I was trying to think of my phrase, but yeah, I feel like being able to work with those strengths with people and kind of figure out how you can develop them, and figure out where are those spaces that you need to kind of build up their skill sets a little bit too, because you can't do everything yourself as much as you would like to. There's only 24 hours in a day, and you maximize those 24 hours, James. You absolutely do. Sometimes I feel like you turn one day into somehow a 36-hour day, somehow magically. You've got a time turner over there. I don't know.
Yeah. The big thing for me is, too, just allowing those individuals to have ownership, in what they're doing. And then I have found that turns out better products in the long run, because it's not my way, but they found a way to make it theirs. And, being appreciative of that, I have found that, people come through more than not.
I love that. So let's talk back a little bit more about technology. What do you think the future holds for technology? Where, as far as GIS and engineering are concerned, where are we headed?
Man, I think the sky's the limit at this point. Where we are now is where, I thought we would be at the end of my career. And, we're just, I'll tell everybody I just finished the front nine and I'm on the back nine, and like I said, we are where I thought we were going to be, when I was hanging up and walking out onto the, walking into the 19th hole, but, there's just so much, that's going on now. I wouldn't even know where to start. It's just been exponential, in the curve of what's come in, since I started, to now, and I just don't see it slowing down. So I think I'd almost do that question a disservice if I tried to answer it, because, 5 minutes from now, technology is going to outpace it. So.
It is a little loaded, isn't it? It's
a
little hard, yeah. What should Esri be thinking about that would benefit engineers and the engineering space as we move forward with our products and offerings?
In some of the conversations you and I have had, in the past, I think some type of packaging, tool sets, that would be geared more towards the engineering, side of things, and being able to leverage, some more advanced techniques, within GIS, to a point to where, we could see it or, understand it without having to have, that deep, understanding, or, have the degree, in, geospatial, or have those certifications. But, really for us, being able to have some way of talking with our GIS groups, so that, there's kind of a codex of, hey, I need this. And then they understand what we're saying. And then when they come back and be like, oh, well, we can do this, we've got a deeper understanding of, what they're saying. And I think like a little, some type of package tool set, within that toolbox, would be something, really cool, for us. Like one of the things that I've tried to do is to be, an ambassador, to the discipline and, make it more like advantageous, to people. A lot of people look at STEM, one of the things that go with that, like one of the things that I'm trying to do is like get into the universities, start having conversations with the students, about, what engineering is, giving them some real world examples, so that they're not, speculating themselves, I think sometimes, some come in and they might be even a little disappointed, with how things are, from the day to day, or they struggle, to see that big picture, kind of scenario.
James, tell me, what do you think you and other engineers could do to promote the field of engineering to a new generation? What could engineers do, to pass on best practices to students in the field?
I think one of the things, that we're seeing, is, getting out into the community more. We're starting to do that with some public engagement, but I think even at the level, getting into the high schools, or even the universities, and starting to have those conversations, with a new generation of what engineering is. I think that's one thing, that a lot of kids, or prospective students might struggle with is, what is engineering? What is it like day to day? They see it, and there's so many different, aspects of it. There's so many different fields, but being able to get in, at that level and promote, engineering, or even, any STEM, type, program, and being in to show, real world examples, hey, what's, something that we've done, what's cool, what do we like about it, and kind of showing, that there is, more than just one side, to this field, and how rewarding that it, can be, not only in just, day-to-day lives, but it does, and can afford you a comfortable, life to provide for you and your family, as well as, give you something to hang your hat on, at the end of the day, but going in and just starting to have some real conversations, so that people understand, really what our practice is, and, what we're able to, provide to the world, to our communities as a whole.
Do you get to go in and speak to students at the universities and have conversations with them, as they're going, beginning to go in through the program and things like that?
Yeah, as I've kind of, progressed and gotten into, more of a leadership role, that's one of the things that, again, that I've loved about Volkert is, the company and, my bosses, allow me that freedom, to go in and, promote what we do, be active, with our local universities, serving on some young leadership, communities, and being able to, pass on, the things that, we've been able to do, and share those stories with them, and, try and bring them in and encourage them, if, they might be struggling, in school at the time, hey, just, hang with it, you're going to get through it, and there's some really cool things that you can do, at the end of it.
So, James, what final thoughts would you like to share with us today before we wrap up?
I mean, in the end of it, we're all in the same boat, and, just find somebody to help, at the end of the day, somebody that is struggling to, get to an answer, someone that know is trying to do a good job, and they want to, be able to provide, something to that client, and that product and deliverable. Just find that one person and say, hey, how can I help you today? Can't tell you, I had several people do that over my career, and it really helped me, and I've tried to pass that on, to the others. And as my mentor used to say, at the end of the day, it always comes down to people, regardless.
I think that's an amazing conclusion for our episode today. Thank you so much for coming on and having the conversation with me. I've loved it. We always have a good time when we get together and get to talk and hang out. So I really appreciate getting the opportunity to talk through, GIS, engineering, Volkert, all the things that we covered today. I think this was a really interesting discussion. I feel like listeners will be really interested to hear what you have to say. I think some people at Esri will be interested to hear our discussion and how it went. So thank you again so very much for coming on and talking with me today. I really appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate it. Anytime.
That wraps up today's episode. Please feel free to reach out with your comments, or if you have an interesting topic that you would like to hear, please let us know. Thanks again for your time, and tune in for our next podcast.